thank you so much for being here on Part of the Journey. On Part of the Journey, people share their faith stories, and today we're going to dive into your story, so thank you for being here. Let's start out the interview with basically telling us, how many years have you been at Victory and your family? Introduce them to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm excited to be here as part of the journey. So my name is Joe Dodge. I've been here at Victory for about 10 years now. I should probably really start to hammer down that exact date, as that question's been coming up more and more lately. But about 10 years now. My entire family goes here. Me, my wife Amanda, my daughter Annabelle, and my son Evan.
Awesome. So we're going to dive into your history first. What was your faith upbringing like?
Yeah, so my faith upbringing isn't this crazy story or anything like that. I actually had the privilege to go to a private Christian school all the way from kindergarten to 8th grade.
Awesome. And who was God in your life throughout your younger years?
Looking back on it, I call it my naive faith. As a matter of fact, I think I heard the word comfortable faith was one of these last weeks. And the reason that I said it was naive faith is because it was really more of I know God loves me, there's nothing I can't do because I'm Christian, right? And because I believe in God. And just to give a little bit more background about that, at one point in time, I was I'm going to join the military. Nothing bad will happen to me because, I believe in God. And so that's why I kind of call it my naive faith. And it was just, I did the memory work. I learned all the Bible verses, but I really didn't understand it, looking back at it. And so that was kind of my relationship with God. I knew all the verses. I practiced the verses, right? I read my Bible. I went to church, but I really, really didn't understand it at that point in time.
So as time goes on, when would you say that your naive faith started to drift, and you didn't feel as close to God anymore? Yeah,
so after kindergarten through 8th grade, I did go to a public school system. And at that point in time, I didn't think that my faith was starting to drift. I was still at home. I was still going to church every Sunday. I still had some of my friends, from private school. I played sports with them. Some of them went to school with me there. But looking back on it, I'd say that's probably when my faith started to drift. I was exposed to different things. I was exposed to things I didn't learn in the school in the past. And I started to question. But I didn't ask anybody. I didn't say hey, I'm learning about this, but God tells me this. What should I believe in? I know I've said it to a couple of people, but where it really started to drift is when I went out to college. So I didn't keep my foundation there. I didn't have that network built, that I would love for everybody to have built. And to kind of understand how it drifted, you kind of have to know what I went into, right? And so I originally went to school for international business and accounting, and then I took this biology class, right? And I loved it. I was wow, this is cool. This is a new puzzle to solve every day. I never learned this way before, right? Some of these things I was never exposed to before. And then as I started to do that, right, you always hear about, this rift between the church and science, right?
You essentially became a researcher of the faith that you were brought up?
A little bit. Yeah. Essentially, what I ended up finding out is wow, our God is a genius, right? And what an amazing thing that he is, because he created us so crazy when you start to dig down into things that science teaches us. It just... it makes me have such just a deeper understanding and how much love he has for us and how he's thought of everything, right, before that we could even figure it out or that we could even think of.
You mentioned this twice in two past questions. You needed to hear something.
Yeah.
What did you need to hear? What were you craving to hear in those moments?
Man, that's a great question. I needed to be told you know better, right? That was kind of the question. That was kind of the answers that I was getting. Well, you grew up in the faith. You know better. You know better. No, I needed to be told, well, this is why. Okay, well, what about this? This is why. Well, what about this? This is why, right? And I know it's probably going to be on your question, but, that's how I connected with Victory so much. The way that we do things here and the way that the sermons are created, it's not a lecture, right? It's, hey, we're having a sermon series. Let's deep dive into this. Let's show you how this can impact you in your life, right? And so there's things that they touched in Victory, right away that I was like, huh, that makes total sense, right? Like, I've been looking for that. Like, how come nobody told me this before? Or it's not that nobody didn't tell me that before, but nobody told it to me in that way for me to understand it.
I definitely think there's beauty in researching what you believe.
Yeah.
Because you begin to really understand it, right? You're not just believing it because you were told to.
Exactly.
You're looking into it and really trying to understand it. What were some of the next steps that you took to really start to get back into your faith?
Yeah, we searched years and years for one of the biggest things was for what connected to us, like finding, not like you said, not being told, but learning about God more, right, deeper, and having those things for us. And we went to multiple churches, and there's nothing wrong with those churches. It just wasn't the church for us and what we were looking for. To a point where we were traveling 50 minutes every Sunday to go to what seemed like a good fit at the time. And even at that, it was like, well, we have family here, that's part of it. And then until we got a phone call saying, hey, there's a church that just popped up by your house. We're like, no, we live there. We just drove by there. It's not there. And, oh, there it is. So
you had talked about earlier that you needed that community. And that's something that you didn't have as a young child, and you didn't have that in high school, and you didn't have that in college. Mm-hmm. When you came to Victory, did you find that here?
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say I had the opportunity to have that community, but I didn't feel like I needed it, right, type deal. Because I don't want to discredit anybody, right? Like, there's there, but... I did need that community. That was part of just the beginning part of my journey in faith, coming back to faith. Absolutely. Like, from the moment that you walk in the door, and I've had this conversation with hundreds of people that have walked through that door, but from the moment that you walk in that door, you just feel different. Like, you feel it. The community aspect, the feel, the vibe, whatever you want to call it, it's apparent as the moment you walk into those doors.
Where's your faith at today?
Yeah, my faith is stronger than ever, and where I would say my faith is at now is a mature, evolved faith. Listen, it's a tough time, and it's not, hey, I'm going to do this on my own. It's a tough time. I need to dig deeper and come closer to God, and that's the one thing that I've learned through all of that is the closer that I've gotten to God, everything made more sense. I found peace in the chaos, all that kind of stuff. Because it was more inquisitive. Like, I learned my lesson. I can't do this on my own. I tried that. I knew God, tried to do things on my own. I failed. Thankfully, God brought me back into Him. And now when things get tough, the first thing I do is go into the Bible studies, replay Victory sermons, right? All those things that I know that I need now because it's a mature faith. I don't assume that everything's going to be okay. We all know that there's trials and tribulations for life, and it's not to blame God, like, hey, God, where are you? It's like, God, I know you're there. I know you have a message for me. What's that message? Where is it? I need to find it.
I think finding your faith is kind of like a roller coaster ride.
Absolutely.
It's up and down. And in a previous interview, you had talked about that you had issues with depression and anxiety.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that and how that also challenged your faith?
Yeah, no, great question. So yes, that's true. I did struggle with depression and anxiety. And the crazy thing is I didn't realize it. And that realization came as my faith matured. And I'll never forget the time that I actually finally figured out that I probably was suffering from depression. And it's not like the depression that you think about. It's more of they call it like a highly functioning depression. And this wasn't actually diagnosed by a doctor or anything like that. Things were going, we're on the up and up and all of that. And as, God blessed our life, there was more and more responsibility put on not only me, but put on the family, and then, we got more and more things, which meant more and more responsibility, right? And so, just life, right? Life happens, kids happen, right? They're all blessings. They're all really, really good blessings. And for some reason, the more responsibility I got, the more and more I thought I had to control things that just to keep bad things from happening, right? And at the time, I had no idea that that's what it was from, right? And so what that ended up doing, and this is all part of my faith journey, long story short, all of that worry caused that anxiety, and I let that worry blind my faith in God, right? Not that I fell out of faith. I didn't know that I was doing it, but that's what had happened. I didn't give control. I wasn't giving control to God. I was trying to take control again, right? Kind of like try to do it by myself, right? And I've already learned that lesson that's not the right way to do it. And so I let that worry blind my faith. And because I let that worry and all of those voices inside my own head say that you're going to fail if you don't do this, or you need to think about this, or what about this, and create situations that probably are never going to happen, right? So I was telling myself that you weren't good enough. You aren't good enough. Oh my gosh, if you make one mistake, you're going to be a failure. Well, what if you fail at that and lose your job? Then you're going to be a failure for us, right? And these are just, there's no reasoning behind them. They're just things that they did, and it caused an anxiety, and then it actually put me into what was called a high-functioning depression. And I'll never forget it, because Amanda would be like, "Are you sure you're okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm fine." She's like, "Well, you're kind of irritable a little bit." It's a good way of doing, she puts me in my place, which is great. I'm like, "No, but now that you said that, now I'm mad," right? Just boom, anything like that I could have said. What? Now I'm mad. And so once I got honest to the fact that I probably was depressed, the more and more I read, the more and more it became apparent that I needed to get honest with myself about what was causing that depression. And that depression was caused by anxiety. Well, what's causing my anxiety is the fact that I can't control everything, right? As much as I want to try, I can't control everything. And so once I realized that, is like, well, how do I do this, right? And it's surrender yourself to God, right? God has put you directly in the place where you need to be at this point in time for a reason. He loves you. Maybe you fail, maybe you won't, but he loves you, and there's a reason why you're there. And the more and more I read about that, right, that's what, just getting honest about it and knowing that God put me in that position for a reason. I don't know what that reason is, but surrendering that and knowing that, that's kind of how I found my peace in all the chaos, right? Yeah, is life nuts? Always, right? But what I know is God put me in that moment for a reason, and I fully have faith in him. And I know at the end of the day, that's what matters the most. And, that's kind of how I've overcome right now, right? There's peaks and valleys. I would say maybe I'm on the side of the hill right now, because he tells us, I will walk through that valley with you. He doesn't say there'll never be a valley. He says, but I've got you every step of the way.
If you were talking to someone that was dealing with anxiety or depression like you were, what would you say to them?
Yep, get honest with yourself, right? Like I said before. And that's what worked for me. And as I've read and continue to read on all of it, that's what a lot of people say, right? Be honest. And that's kind of what you hear in some of the sermons that we hear every Sunday, right? You got to be honest with yourself. You can't get to the bottom of it with lying to yourself. I've lied to myself in the past. It got me out of faith, right? I started to lie about my feelings and how I feel, and that was leading me down a path I didn't want to go, right? And so I got really honest. It's hard. It's difficult. I get it. I'm here if you want to have a conversation. I know everybody in this congregation is here for you if you want to have that conversation, but you got to get honest with yourself. Sometimes, like I said earlier, sometimes you don't hear, what you want to hear, but maybe that's what you need to hear. Maybe that is what you wanted to hear. Get honest with yourself. Figure out what's causing it. Because what I can say is when you figure out exactly what's causing that feeling, God has a solution. God has a solution to all of it, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety, whether it's control, right? Those are all the things for me, but whatever's causing that anxiety, whatever's causing that depression, don't lie to yourself about it. Get honest with it. You have God, your Father, there for you 24/7 to say a prayer and say, Lord, I need you to help me to be honest about myself.
Thank you so much for being vulnerable and sharing your story. We really appreciate it, and thank you for being a part of the journey.
Thank you for having me. If anybody ever wants to have a conversation, you guys know where to find me. Pull me aside. I'm happy to be there for anybody.
Off camera, Joe shared a passage that helped him through his difficult time, and that was Philippians 4, verse 6. Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition, with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. It's a great reminder that no matter what we're going through, whether that's mental health struggles or whether that's challenges with our faith, we can always rely on God to be there. We can talk to Him, He's waiting to hear us, and He will help us through it. That's all for this episode. Be sure to use the buttons below to like and share, and don't forget to hit subscribe so that you'll be notified when our next episode drops.